Coming up on Network Africa, Libya warring sides agree to restarting ceasefire talks after weeks of intense fighting. Tanzania's health ministry says COVID-19 cases in the country are declining. Plus, the World Food Programme warns of a fragile food security situation in East Africa, threatened by a gridlock of food trucks at the border. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in Libya, where the two main sides have agreed to resume stalled ceasefire talks on how to end months of fighting. The United Nations Support Mission in Libya, in a statement, says both parties are encouraged to commit to fully authorizing their representatives in the negotiations to enable them to complete the ceasefire agreement. Libya's conflict pits the UN-backed government against forces loyal to Russian ally General Khalifa Haftar. General Haftar walked out of the initial talks held in Moscow in January without signing a deal. However, the UN has told supporters of both sides to abide to agreement on cessation of all forms of military support permanently. Well, let's discuss this further. Joining us now is an African Affairs analyst, Lester Wilcox. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us on the program.
Thank you, Laius. It's nice having me.
Well, back in January, the Libyan peace talks failed without General Khalifa Haftar signing a deal. The UN now says yet another one has been agreed. Do you think this will be the turning point for the fighting in Libya?
Well, I was on your program in January when this issue came up, and my position has been that of cautious optimism because the interest in Libya is entrenched. A conflict that has various interests pulling each side of the divide is just not what anybody can think will just have a go at the peace table, except the interests that are backing these forces, especially the Caliph force, being backed outside the United Nations umbrella. It's also I am wishing that there is a truce at this point. But sincerely, I will still have a cautious optimism and hoping that the best will happen, because I'm not see in one. There has been series and series of talk. Moreover, now that there is difficulty in communication, difficulty in movement, occasioned by the COVID, I do not understand. I do not see how these parties can hold a virtual talk and arrive at a meaningful conclusion. But nothing is impossible, and I want to believe that the parties have all learned a bitter lesson, because this war has raged for too long, and there has been series of serious fighting even amidst this COVID pandemic in Libya. Thus, compound the problem of the average Libyan. So, if the UN is ready to broker a new peace, a new talk, I think it is something that everybody should give support to and see how far that can go.
Yes, the war has been since 2011 when, the UN-backed forces toppled long-serving leader Muammar Gaddafi. But, this time around, what really do you think is the solution to the crisis? The capital now is the scene of so much fighting between the rival forces. That's the GNA and the LNA, supported by Haftar.
Well, the unfortunate thing was back in 2011 when the UN forces led by France took on Gaddafi headlong and liberated the people, especially those in Benghazi, that was at the verge of genocide from Gaddafi forces. When the UN passed a resolution and the French military took over the fight and was able to stop Gaddafi from committing genocide in Benghazi and other areas, it was a welcome development to everybody. The unfortunate thing was that there was no clear plan B of post-Gaddafi era. So the field was left to anybody who can grab the grontal of leadership. That was the first mistake, because the objective then was to get rid of Gaddafi. but there was nothing on ground post-Gaddafi era. So that created a lot of layers of armed groups and persons who are interested in the seat of government. Now, the solution, as the United Nations has brought, is a unity government. I do not, the United Nations has talked about this unity government, which was for me the best option out, because that has been what has helped in several conflict areas. A national unity government where everybody will be represented. That is just the only way. There is no other way than to strengthen the national unity government that is being backed by the United Nations. Because the United Nations is the body that represents the entire continent. The entire world. And so that is the only way, because there is no other way, because these are all ethnic militias of different dimensions. No one can win the war. Even if another militia overrun this government, problem will still be there, except where there is total disarmament of every militia, and then the national government, the government of national unity, put in place by the United Nations, is meant to work. That is just the simple truth that can solve this situation. But of course, the warring parties must be on board to accept these decisions.
Okay, let's talk about each rival's ally. The GNA, which is the UN-backed government, is supported by Turkey, Italy, and also Qatar, while Haftar's forces is backed by Egypt, Russia, the UAE. There's so many other countries that, have different interests in Libya. Do you see this? Will this have a positive impact on Libya's search for peace in the long run?
Certainly it will not. This is the same situation that we find ourselves in Yemen. This is the same situation that we find ourselves in Yemen. One, when there is religion, when religion is applied to any situation, it becomes worse, especially when there is the Islamic factor that comes to any situation, makes it worse. Now, the conflict is between Europe and Russia. Russia do not want Europe to have a stronghold, a grab on Libya. Russia is doing all it can to ensure that to whittle the power of Europe as far as Libya is concerned. That is the main aim of Russia. And of course, it have its own allies. Again, Qatar and UAE being on the other side of the divide will also pitch themselves against other Islamic rivals. So it's quite a complex situation. It will never, with all these forces pulling from left, pulling from right, pulling from left, there can never be peace in Libya. Now, it will take a United Nations again to get all this interest to back out. If this interest do not back out, because really and truly they say whoever plays the piper takes the tune. If Russia is funding the Caliph factor, then Russia will always dictate what happens in the Caliph and what the Caliph factor takes to the table. If Italy and other European countries is backing the GNU, it also will tell on what they bring to the table. So long as there are persons playing the pipe, Russia according to Libya according to burn. So it might be host on Libyans, because the solution lies with Libyans. It might be host on Libyans to see if the interests of the foreigners are superseding the interests of their own nationals. It takes common sense at this point. And with a strong UN, I can't even suggest a military action in Libya, because right now Russia is a member of the United Nations Security Council, and Russia will veto anything that will bring about military intervention in Libya. He will always veto it. So it's now left for common sense. And the Libyans, especially the warring factions, to know that what is at stake here is the interest of Libya and Libyans, not interest of America, interest of Russia, interest of China or anybody. It's the interest of Libyans. So that is why the Caliph faction, I need to appeal to them at this point, that is time for common sense to reign. Because the government of national unity put in place by the UN is the only way to go that could bring every warring party together for them to form a government, and then they take it for maybe a transition period of 5 years or whatever, for that to be a stability, and then a proper election can be held, and then whoever wins continue to do for where they. But I think the Libyans, they have suffered a lot. 9 years in the trenches, 9 years of war, a senseless war amid the COVID pandemic, the COVID epidemic that is now putting a lot of strain on the healthcare service of Libyans. So I think it's not left for Libyan leaders to think twice and know that what's at stake is the interest of Libya and not that the interest of the world.
All right, then, Alistair Wilcox, African Affairs Analyst, thank you so much for your thoughts on Network Africa.
It's always my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.
Africa's coronavirus cases have surpassed 150,000. The continent remains the least affected region, according to the World Health Organization. From that figure, 85,578 are the active confirmed cases. More than 64,000 people have recovered, and the death toll stands at over 4,349. South Africa still has the highest number of cases on the continent with 35,812. It's followed by Egypt with 26,384 cases and Nigeria with 10,578. Algeria is fourth with 9,513 recorded cases, followed by Ghana, which has seen 8,297 cases. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are Egypt with 1,005, South Africa 705, Algeria 661, Nigeria 299, and Sudan 298. Tanzania's health ministry has spoken about a decline in the coronavirus cases in the country, saying the commercial hub of Dar es Salaam only has 4 active cases. At an event in Tanga region, Umi Mwalimu told the gathering that God had spared the country from the pandemic. The government stopped releasing data on coronavirus cases in April after President John Magufuli accused health officers of exaggerating the crisis. Last month, the U.S. ambassador said hospitals in Dar es Salaam were overwhelmed and that the chance of contracting the virus was extremely high. However, the U.S. did not give or provide any evidence. Meanwhile, older students in the country have reported back to school this week after the government announced they would reopen educational establishments for college students and final year students. Senegal has postponed the restart of schools until further notice after several teachers tested positive for the coronavirus. Schools were scheduled to gradually resume on Tuesday after weeks of shutdown due to the pandemic, but some teachers tested positive for coronavirus in the Casamance area, that's south of the country. A statement from the Education Ministry did not say how many teachers tested positive, nor in how many schools. Senegal has recorded 3,739 positive COVID-19 cases since the start of the outbreak, with 43 deaths. Well, we'll move on to Tunisia, who is planning to reopen its borders at the end of June, after more than 3 months of being closed due to the pandemic. After a meeting of the National Committee to combat COVID-19, the government announced that the land, sea and air borders will reopen starting from June the 27th. The country has recorded 1,086 confirmed cases with 965 recoveries and 48 deaths. While the UN's World Food Programme is warning that East Africa is at risk as governments screen lorry drivers to contain the coronavirus, delaying the delivery of vital food supplies, causing bottlenecks at borders. The agency is shipping in 2,000 tons of beans and cooking oil to feed some of Uganda's 1.4 million refugees, but some of it is stocked at Kenya's Mombasa port and some stock at the Ugandan border. The line of lorries at the border town of Busia between Kenya and Uganda stretches over 60 kilometers. WFP's spokesperson in East Africa, Peter Smedon, says the UN agency is concerned that border delays will impact an already fragile food security situation in the region.
There was a fear that the economic repercussions, the socio-economic repercussions of closing borders, of not allowing people to move around, would cause more deaths than COVID-19 in the region itself. So the economic impact will be huge. Already we've seen millions of people in the urban slums in Nairobi alone losing their job. It really is essential that borders are open and that goods, commercial and humanitarian, food and other goods, can move smoothly. The solution has to be comprehensive, so it's not just getting the trucks through, it's not just changing drivers at borders, which is what's happening at the moment in some countries where they change a Ugandan for a Tanzanian. It needs to be a comprehensive approach, and drivers' concerns need to be taken into account. And I think governments will work away at this one and make it smoother. This huge traffic jam that you saw, we hope will clear in a few days. And governments are taking into account the various concerns. And I think they understand the threat that closing borders or having them closed by huge queues of trucks will pose to the region during COVID-19 unless they fix this problem.
Still to come on the program. Thank you for staying with us. With the increasing number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the country, a 40-bed capacity isolation center has been added to the existing facilities of Lagos State here in Nigeria. The fully kitted center, which is courtesy of the Nigerian Navy, was commissioned for use by the Flag Officer West Rear Admiral Oladele Daji. The center is expected to cater to personnel who have tested positive to the virus.
The Nigerian Navy, having identified this need for increased isolation centers as a proactive measure towards quick response to COVID-19 management, especially in situations where other facilities are overwhelmed with high number of patients, this 40-bed isolation center is part of the contributions of the Nigerian Navy's efforts to fight against the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. The isolation center will be used to isolate positive but asymptomatic persons under strict guidance of trained medical personnel with technical support from the Lagos State government. And that is why the NN has been in close liaison with the Lagos State government and representatives of the NCDC in Lagos State since this project was conceived.
To other stories now, following the announcement of the elections results in Burundi, the UN Security Council is calling on all stakeholders to preserve a peaceful climate in the country so as to resolve eventual disputes. President of the UN Security Council for the month of May, Sven Jurgensen, says all political actors should refrain from incitement that may lead to violence. On May the 25th, Burundi's Election Commission declared the governing party's candidate, Evariste Ndayishimiye, the winner of the country's presidential election amid accusations of rigging by the leading opposition challenger.
The members of the Security Council have taken note of the provisional outcome of the presidential and legislative elections in Burundi, announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission on the 25th of May 2020. Taking into account that the electoral process is yet to be completed, the members of the Security Council called on all stakeholders to preserve a peaceful climate and to continue to utilize peaceful and legal means to resolve any matters that may arise from the electoral process. The members of the Security Council noted the call of the African Union Commission and the United Nations Secretariat to all political actors to refrain from incitement that may lead to violence and to favor concerted action in dealing with electoral disputes. The members of the Security Council reiterated their full commitment to and support of the people of Burundi.
A UN female peacekeeper, Sergeant Almaz Kabitima Desta, is a young woman from Ethiopia who's breaking a social norm. She's a mechanic who fixes and maintains an average of 4 vehicles per day to ensure that fellow peacekeepers 7 can patrol the region and provide protection to vulnerable citizens.
26-year-old Sergeant Almaz Kabitima Desta from Ethiopia is currently serving with the United Nations mission in South Sudan as a mechanic. She fixes and maintains an average of 4 vehicles each day to ensure UN-MISS peacekeepers can patrol the region, providing protection to vulnerable civilians consistently. Sergeant Dasta joined the Ethiopian Army 6 years ago after completing a 2-year course in auto mechanics.
I joined the military because it's a noble profession which I've always wanted to do. Auto mechanics is what I enjoy, keeping vehicles running.
One of 47 female peacekeepers from Ethiopia deployed to the region, Sergeant Dasta says she's grateful for the opportunity to serve as a United Nations peacekeeper.
South Sudan feels like a second home. It's very motivating to see them viewing me as a role model since I am a female peacekeeper and a mechanic, carrying out my duties with my male counterparts.
While Sergeant Dasta is a committed peacekeeper, she admits that being away from her family and loved ones, especially during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, is difficult.
Being away from family in a time of such a worldwide health crisis is worrisome. In all my daily communication with my family back home, I share health tips on what they should do to protect themselves and stay safe from the pandemic.
Despite the hardships and sacrifices that being a peacekeeper entails, Sergeant Dasta recommends her career as an option for young women across the globe. As peacekeeping continues to evolve, female peacekeepers like Sergeant Dasta play a larger role within the community they serve.
If you are fair, you can move mountain. If you are fair, you can move mountain. All you need is a little patience.
And finally on the program, on a rather sad note, reggae music icon Majek Odumi Fasheke, popularly known as Majek Fashek, has died. According to his manager, Omenka Uzoma, Majek died at the age of 57. The singer, who became popular for hits such as Send Down the Rain, So Long, Too Long, and many others, died in New York after a protracted battle with cancer. He had earlier been hospitalized at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in London in November 2019. The songwriter and guitarist enjoyed a music career that spanned over 3 decades and known to have worked with several international artists. Condolences to the family. And that's where we end Network Africa today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.